One man inspired the nation to stand against child labor through his iconic photographs. Louis Hine, a child labor photographer with progressive thinking, challenged himself and the thought of art as photography in his time period to show America the atrocities of child labor and why it should have been abolished. He solved the devastating problem of child labor by successfully transmitting the lived experiences of his subjects, the child laborers, through his photographs.
Hine was really one of the first child advocates with his photography. That is a remarkable thing. People saw his photographs, were captivated and taken by the power of them.
The instant of Hine's photograph is once upon a time, but it is also outside of time. The moment unfolds to tell a story, a fable, the emotion world of these fables, where right is right and wrong is wrong. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Louis Hine's fight against child labor. A few decades after the Civil War, in the early 20th century, the country was blooming with new opportunities. Natural resources were abundant, new inventions were being made, and America was entering an industrial boom. It called for a huge demand for workers at factories, mills, and farms. However, the middle and lower classes were missing out on any economic reward from this demand. The wages were so low that they could hardly meet their basic needs, so many families started sending their children to work to earn money to support their families. This practice soon became common in the average American household. Businesses encouraged this child labor because the children worked for significantly lower wages than adults and were too afraid to speak up against authority.
The nature of the American economy, of course, had a great demand for unskilled, cheap labor, as well as the movement largely of immigrants, many of them from Southern and Eastern Europe, desperately poor, wanting to make lives for themselves, for future generations, and so also dependent on child labor.
But many didn't realize that child labor was practiced under abusive and horrible cruelty. It took children out of school and ruined their futures. It made kids work with heavy, dangerous machinery. It stole their childhoods, and most importantly, it hurt the children. Many accidents happened with the machinery that made children lose limbs, severely injured them, or even killed them. Physical and mental fatigue was common, and this also caused many accidents. In addition, children developed diseases like bronchitis and tuberculosis due to their dire working conditions. Sadly, the cruelty of child labor was not well known among urban society who had influence over the government.
There was an awful lot of people in the country who they often lived the sort of middle class section of the city where not anywhere near the cotton mills or the other mills and factories. So they may have known about kids working there, but they never saw them. They weren't sympathetic to the movement because they didn't even know much about it.
To make the public aware of the atrocities of child labor, in 1904, a small group of social reformers formed the National Child Labor Committee, or the NCLC, to campaign for legislation to regulate child labor in America. The NCLC then realized that the public and Congress would be convinced to act against child labor only if they saw with their own eyes the terrible unfairness of child labor and felt the emotions of wretched sorrow and sympathy towards the children. So it was vital that they must hire an adept photographer to capture sincere photographs of child laborers, along with a thorough investigation of the situation to prove and show the veracity and magnitude of child labor to make their arguments more convincing. This was when they hired Louis Hine as a social documentary photographer and a photojournalist investigator to fulfill the pivotal job of inspiring the people to take a stand against child labor through photographs. Hine was the best option for this job because he had worked long hours for low wages as a young man to support his family, so he understood the struggles of labor. He also had previous experience as a teacher and as a social documentary photographer with progressive thinking. His experiences made him adept for this job. From 1908 till 1917, Hine traveled all across America, photographing children working under extreme conditions in mills, factories, mines, fields, canneries, and other workplaces. He showed utmost dedication by taking over 5,000 pictures, and he traveled around 30,000 miles a year to photograph child laborers and their workplaces all across the country. Hine also discreetly collected information about the children's age, their working conditions, factory locations, and other supporting information to caption these photographs. These captions made his photographs more authentic and believable, and he showed that he truly cared about the children and their predicament.
He had a difficult time getting into the factories, and he had to wait around outside and take pictures of kids going in and out of the factory. Sometimes he was able to go in and look around, and he had all sorts of guises that he went under, that he was an insurance photographer, or he was, doing a study on machinery. Difficult time sometimes with the factory owners who didn't like what he was publishing and printing and sometimes questioned him.
Hine did not concede to these factory owners' oppositions, and he even ignored their death threats. Hine mastered the technique of taking pictures of the child laborers while he was in an unknown city and an unknown factory, knowing that he possessed only moments of opportunity to be availed. Yet he approached the children with an unwavered tenderness and remarkably captured the scanty moment with a flash of light, transforming the moment into a photograph that spoke for itself and the world around it. The care and devotion he applied towards his photographs was truly phenomenal. The impact of Hine's photographs on child labor was immediate and profound, mainly because these photographs radiated emotion and compelled people to support the movement against child labor. Hine's photographs also inspired many with the concept of social reform photography, not because of the subjects of the photographs, but because the images were presented with the unaltered truth. He did not want his subjects to be viewed as humble or beautiful. For Hine, the purpose of his photography lay in its ability to interpret the everyday world's pain and sorrow. He once said, "I wanted to show the thing that had to be corrected. I wanted to show the things that had to be appreciated." He sincerely believed that if people could see for themselves the abuse and injustice of child labor, they would demand laws to end those evils. Hine worked very hard for roughly 10 years to publicize his child labor photographs in various forms. Hine's iconic child labor photographs influenced the public, social reformers, and legislation for roughly 35 years.
But when Hine's pictures started showing up, they went into newspapers and magazines, sorts of places. What happened was a lot of people who voted, middle-class people who voted, they said, "Oh, this is wrong. We shouldn't allow this." And they put pressure on their politicians, and they wrote letters to the editor and so on. That made child labor a great big issue.
Social reformers inspired by Hine's photographs organized strikes, shutdowns, and protests against child labor. There was also a lot of opposition from the factory owners and exploitive parents in favor of child labor.
The argument that they used, and others that also opposed child labor regulation, argued that the government at any level, but especially the federal government, should not be involved in regulating business.
Reformers that were influenced by Hine's photographs were determined to strictly prohibit child labor, so they attempted many times for federal-level child labor laws. But those attempts didn't pass congressional support, so they were ruled as unconstitutional. But Hine's photographs sparked such a surge in protests that the Congress acknowledged the need for child labor regulations. So finally, in 1938, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed the Fair Labor Standards Act with full congressional support, which limited the hours of children under 16 and prohibited children from doing dangerous jobs. This law was a remarkable victory for child laborers and for Hine, and it continues to be the law of the land for all the workers in America even today. Hine's social photography was critical to the advancement of child welfare. The work Hine did for this reform was more responsible than all other efforts in bringing the need to public attention. Louis Hine's long battle with child labor through his photographs ended in success. He was the reason that so many child laborers went back to school and had bright futures. He was the reason that many more children did not perish from workplace accidents. He is the reason why many social documentary photographers today are working towards child welfare all across the world. He took a stand in history and fought to improve the lives of children across America.
Every time I close my eyes, I see that picture still. When textile work was carried on with babies.